Hello class, welcome to 1.2, Properties of Real Numbers and Identifying Them. Just like yesterday's lessons, this lesson here is going to rely heavily on vocabulary. So get your notes ready and we'll take a look at a few of these properties and how they work. You can see at the additive identity property of 0. A lot of these are going to make sense as what you're going to see. The definition is add 0 to any number and the answer is itself. Well, that's pretty much common sense, right? It's like the identity. Every person has their identity and it is not going to change by adding a 0 to it. So a couple things that this looks like: it could be 4 plus 0 equals 4. It could be x plus 0 equals x. Remember, x just means basically any number that's here. If you add 0 to it, it's going to equal itself. Negative numbers, decimals, fractions. If you add 0, it becomes itself. If we're looking at the multiplication property of 0, very much the same, kind of looking the same thing. What do you know? If you multiply any number by 0, the answer is 0. Okay? Once again, 3 times 0 equals 0. X times 0 equals 0. Anything you multiply by 0 becomes 0. And that is called the multiplication property of 0. And we also look at the multiplicative identity property of 1. Well, what do we know? Any number multiplied by 1 equals itself. So let me move this screen here, hopefully so you can see what's going on. 5 times 1 equals 5. And x times 1 equals x. Again, doesn't matter what number you're looking at. As long as you multiply by 1, it becomes itself. So those are 3 of our first properties. Pause now if you have to take some time to write any of those examples down. Alright, a few more properties. These ones are a little bit trickier to identify as we work through. But if we're looking at the commutative property of addition and multiplication, could be either one. The main thing you're looking for here is the order of the elements will change. So, whether we do 4 times 3 or 3 times 4, the answer is both the times going to be 12. If we're adding and we do 4 plus 3 or 3 plus 4, both of those equal 7. So the nice thing about the commutative property is no matter what order you do them, the answers are not going to change. The one thing we need to be aware of is that does not work for subtraction or division. All right, this is only properties for adding and multiplying. The same thing is going to be true for the associative property of addition and multiplication. The order does not change, but the grouping of the elements will change. So if we look at 2 examples here, the first one we have the groups 5 plus 4 in a grouping plus 6 equals 5 plus 4 plus 6 in their grouping. Again, you spent a lot of time in the past doing order of operations. It doesn't matter if we do 5 plus 4, 9, and 9 plus 6 equals 15, or if we group 6 plus 4, which is 10, and 10 plus 5, both of your answers are going to end up equaling 15. Same thing with multiplying. This works for multiplying as well. It doesn't matter if we do the 5 times 4, which is 20. 20 times 6 is 120. Or if we do the 4 times 6, which is 24, then times 5, which is 120. Both of the answers are going to be the same. First one might be a little bit easier to do, but the moral of the story is for associative property, if you change the groupings or which one you end up doing first, as long as they're all multiply or all add, and you didn't change anything around, the associative property will hold true. Alright. Substitution. This is just like it sounds like. I always like to refer to this as like, when you're playing any sports game, basketball, soccer, and you do a substitution. You are going to replace with something equivalent. So if we see something like 14 plus 6 and we know that equals 20, if you replace that or even if you just add them together, you are replacing it with something equivalent. This could take something, looks familiar, but a lot of times if you're just trying to replace it with something, That is what we call substitution. And the last one is the distributive property. And this is pretty much where we multiply through the parentheses. You'll often see something on the outside 5 times the 6 plus 2. That's going to go and get distributed to both of them. Okay, that is an opportunity where we can say, oh, that's 5 times 6. Oh, that's plus a 5 times 2. A lot of times we'll also spend the time to simplify and substitute and work to our answer, but the distributive property is simply just distributing these numbers in. This is especially important when we start putting variables in there, and now we have like an x plus 2, 5 times the x plus 2, and we have to distribute to both of them. So these two terms we cannot add together, but we know that this distributed would become the 5 times x and a 5 plus 2. Again, we'd probably take a minute to simplify that 5 times 2 to a 10, but the distributive property is simply distributing that outside number into whatever you see in your parentheses. All right, take a second to pause if you need to kind of copy any of those answers down before we move into some practice. All right, practicing with this is just going to be looking at some examples and identifying and determining which property of these real numbers is applied to the statement below. So there's a list of properties that we talked about in our notes. And if we look at a 12 times 5 equals 5 times 12, we need to ask ourselves, what is going on here and what property does that fall into? Well, we see multiplication, so that's going to narrow it down to one of those. And it looks like here all we did is switch the order of our numbers. This is going to fall into our commutative property of multiplication. Pause now and answer the next two before we move on. See if you can identify them. And when you're ready, let's kind of take a look at the next one. Well, this one here, we're looking at the parentheses. The order of these numbers did not change, but the parentheses changed to groupings. It's all multiplication. So this falls into our grouping category, which we know is associative. So if we look at the associative property of multiplication. And the last one here, we're looking at 3 plus 5 plus 8, 3 plus 8 plus 5. Looks like our 5 and 8 kind of got switched around. So everything's addition, that's good news. We changed the order around. Again, this is going to kind of go into our commutative property, but in this, that should be commutative property of association, little typo there. Please go back and scratch that one. Make sure that third one ends up being a commutative property of addition. All right, take practice on the rest of those and make sure you check your work. See you guys tomorrow. Have a great day.